a child point and say, the king is in the altogether, and then everybody else goes, he is, and all starts laughing because they're all going along with it, because nobody was brave enough to actually say, oh, I disagree, they're not invisible clothes, he's just naked.
Timur Kuran, who wrote a paper in 1987 called Chameleon Voters and Public Choice, for our gentle listeners who might want to look that up. And they were talking about wokeness and how it ends, basically. How does wokeness end? And the concept that it's a mind virus. I think you and I have discussed that, or you've discussed it before, that takes hold in organisations without a powerful leader, which is interesting when you think about what's happening at the moment. And it defines new types of impropriety. So it's one or two individuals in these organisations who get themselves in a position where they can start to define new types of impropriety, like trans women are women, or whatever it might be. And this guy, Timur Kuran, calls it preference falsification. And what that means is a publicly expressed preference that differs from privately held preferences. So all this stuff like trans, white supremacy, all that bullshit, most people don't believe it, that it's true, but they start to get to a position where, because a small group of people have started to say this is a new correct way to behave, they start expressing publicly preference for that bullshit, basically. And then this guy, Timur Kuran, talks about how the cycle ends. And what is fascinating about this is, it ends when powerful leaders say enough is enough. And that is what we are now seeing across the Atlantic, isn't it? So it's not just Trump, because Brian Armstrong, who's a business leader over there, the University of Chicago, MIT, Twitter, obviously, which is Musk or whatever, have started to say enough is enough. And when that happens, people start speaking their minds and act according to their actual beliefs. And this guy, Timur Kuran, calls this the moment of the preference cascade, where basically the falsification ends and people's true preferences come out. But what he's saying is it happens fast. It happens really fast. So it builds up slowly, preference falsification, but when it goes quick. And is that what is happening now? It certainly seems to be happening across the Atlantic. Is it starting to, because you and, as you say, we are speaking now far more openly about these things than, like, for example, multiculturalism, diversity, strength, and all that bullshit. That's ending now, isn't it?
It is, but we've always known this was the case. Everything in this article, which I've not read, we already know. We have nursery stories about this. We have a famous nursery story that explains all this. It's called The Emperor's New Clothes. And when that falls apart, it's because someone is, in that case, stupid enough, a child, point and say, the king is in the altogether. And then everybody else goes, he is, and all starts laughing because they're all going along with it, because nobody was brave enough to actually say, oh, I disagree, they're not invisible clothes, he's just naked. So for that to be in a nursery story means we've been in these times before. Not necessarily with woke, but woke is like a religion. It's an ideology. That's all religions are, ideologies. And if you've got enough people pretending to believe in something, then the weak-minded, the Jedi mind trick is, yes, these aren't the droids I'm looking for. And that's all this is. And this is human nature, because we've got 100-year-old nursery rhyme stories about it. So it's falling down now because it took some brave people to stand up to it. And once they've stood up to it, it gives other people permission for them to call out the lunacy, which then triggers more people. It's like one of those domino games where you knock over one domino and it just spirals out and everything. And once you've knocked over that first domino, it goes slow to begin with, but then it's like, oh, look, it's going, and that's what's happening now.
And I get that sense here now. I'm just wondering, am I getting the sense falsely? Maybe our listeners can let us know. But am I getting the sense falsely because I'm kind of in an echo chamber and I'm starting to believe my own kind of publicity about the fact it's moving fast? Or is it? I mean, you said that last night in front of Oldham Council. Yeah. Is it moving fast now in this country?
It's speeding up. we always need to be careful that we're not in echo chambers. So you're right in being wary about that. It's easy to listen to people who agree with you and then come to the conclusion everyone agrees with you. Doesn't work like that, but you're clever enough to know that. But things are speeding up. Just our conversations, the things we're discussing, the fact that the OBR keeps releasing stats that we go, can't believe they've released this. So that's speeding up. I think the history books will point, one of the instigators of all this, I think the history books will point to Twitter and Elon buying Twitter.
Yeah.
It took me a year or two to realise how important that was.
Yeah.
I didn't realise how important it was, but it really has been really, really important. It's speeding up. We can see it all the time. We can see it in mainstream media. We can see what Hollywood are doing. They're cancelling certain crap storylines, and it is speeding up. And I've said this to you before. It all started. Peak woke was the height of Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
And I think that was the peak. I felt a revolution was coming in 2020. I thought the state was going to come down. It felt awful.
What, by the BLM people, you mean?
Just by all the lunatics.
Yeah.
So
really?
Yeah. It felt. I mean, I was going through hell. So
well, I was going to say you were going through personal hell at the time.
So I was looking at things differently. But since then, Black Lives Matter did us a favour. They showed us where to look. So we started looking at critical race theory, what all the bollocks that is. And then the gender thing started coming more to the fore. We started looking at that.
Because this stuff was already in place then.
All these things, they've been in place for, a decade, if not more, especially in America.
Yeah.
But they raised it all, so we started looking and it all started being chipped away. And then suddenly general election with Reform winning only 5 seats, but getting 4 million votes. That was a shock to the system. Having, people like Reform now on the news more than ever before is helping them.
And people in the papers seriously talking about Nigel Farage as the next Prime Minister.
Exactly. So all those things that are changing, that wouldn't have happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Then Trump winning.
Yeah.
So all these things are chipping away, and it's speeding up.